This is Sunrise Daily. I'm Ayo Makinde. Thanks for joining us this morning. You know what? Let's just go straight to the papers today and look at all the issues because there's so much to attend to today. I mean, if you look at what the news said yesterday, you will know that there is a lot. So stick with us. All right, now let's begin with the Daily Trust newspaper, and this is what we have here. This broke sometime in the course of the week, and now it is gaining the attention of the Daily Trust newspaper on its front page as a lead. Take a look at it. VAT ruling, FG to lose taxes amidst dwindling revenue. That's what you have on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. States with low revenue profile will suffer. What does that mean? Again, the details are on the inside pages. FIRS to appeal as Justice Ministry studies case. We only interpreted Constitution. That's according to the Rivers State government. You'll find the details of the story on page 5. Well, the question a number of people are asking is, hey, how does this really help or harm? The details you'll find on the inside pages. Will all the states be able to collect VAT? I remember, when all this whole VAT or no VAT thing started, Lagos started to collect, and then the federal government, took it over, and then Lagos came up with sales tax and so many other things. But quite a lot of taxes people pay, I tell you, but then you need to do a quick search to check. And right under the picture you see there, Nigeria, 5th highest World Bank debtor, owes 4.8 trillion naira. That story is on page 19 of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. And so much about that. That information actually came from the World Bank IDA. The details you find on the inside pages. Right above the main story, right under the nameplate, among others there, FG set to lift Twitter suspension, ascribed to Lai Mohammed, the Minister of Information and Culture. Stories on page 4. And we're ready to reintroduce toll on highways, that's ascribed to Fashola, the Minister of Works and Housing. So many others you find on the inside pages of the Daily Trust this morning. Switch very quickly to Nigerian News Direct. And what do we have there? Oil spill. Shell to pay Ogoni communities 45.9 billion naira compensation. That's what you have on the front page of the Nigerian News Direct this morning. And it's the story, the details of it you'll find on page 2. Compensation satisfies final judgment, says Shell spokesman, and blames spill on third party during World War. You would recall, if you've been following the story, that this whole issue started more than 30 years ago. Is it too late? Find the story, the details on page 2. And stick with us this morning. We'll probably take a quick look at it. Right above the nameplate, FG reintroduces toll gates, lists 10 regulating conditions. Find out that the story is on page 2 of the paper today. And respite as FG plans to lift ban on Twitter. Is there more to that? The details you'll find on page 3 of the Nigerian News Direct. Nigeria, not high debt risk nation. That's kind of a response, if you will, to the position of the World Bank. And that's ascribed to the Debt Management Office, DMO. Story is on page 2 of the Nigerian News Direct this morning. Blueprint newspaper is next, and this is a story that we've been following up on for a while. Cholera spreads, kills 393 in Kano, Katsina, Sokoto, Kebbi, others. The story is on page 6. The NCDC did put out a message about this one, saying that we need to do the needful, states in particular need to do the needful in order to ensure that these things do not happen. But this is what we have on our hands right now. How far so far? What do we need to do to curtail this spread? thousands hospitalized. That's one of the riders. Gombe Health Commissioner suggests way out. Can only hope that Gombe State has already begun to execute some of those suggestions, but you'll find what those suggestions are on page 6 of the Blueprint newspaper today. And right under the nameplate, APC, 15 states petition Boni Committee over ward congresses. What does that mean? The details are on page 6. FG in talks to reverse Twitter ban, says Lai Mohammed. Find the story right there on the inside pages. Daily Times this morning is next. And what do we have on the front page of the Daily Times newspaper? Will lift Twitter ban soon. That's according to the federal government. Find the details on the front page. Continues on page 2. Reintroduces toll plazas on highways. Vehicles to pay between 200 naira and 500 naira toll per trip. That's what you have right there. Yes, that's it. On the front page of the Daily Times newspaper. And above the nameplate, unity pivotal for national security and economic success. That's what you have right there. Of course, there's a back and forth right there on the front page of the Daily Times newspaper, taking you back in time as far back as 1968. Government won't change standpoint. It's a headline from 1968. Wow. Well, that's what you have, and a number of other things you'll see right there on the front pages of the papers this morning. And if I can quickly take you through the Vanguard newspaper, COVID-19, NMA, others seek shutdown of NYSC camps. There are more COVID cases at NYSC camps than reported, according to the federal government, and so many other writers you'll find there on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper and several others. Well, there are so many other stories on the front pages, but as I said, there's so much to deal with. So let's take a short break now. That's the much we can take off the papers and plunge into the issues for the day. Stay with us. One of the stories on the front page is about the oil spill in the Ogoni land, specifically in Rivers State. And just yesterday, Federal High Court orders Shell Petroleum Company to pay 45.9 billion naira to the people of Ogoni in Rivers State within 21 days. And if you dig further, you'll find that this dates 3 decades and more. Is this justice in time, or what do you make of all of these? Let's get some perspective from Israel Aye, who is a partner, commercial and energy law practice, Candelp, and is director, Aspen Energy. He joins us virtually this morning from Lagos. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Mr. Aye. Now, first of all, what do you make of this? There are those who would say this is coming way too late in time.
Thank you very much for having me, but there's not much else anyone can add. I think this sort of brings focus to what everyone who's talked about the governance of the petroleum industry, the energy sector, have talked about. This basically brings focus and attention to a number of things, one of which would be perhaps whether these kinds of matters can be left to the judicial process. You know, in the spectrum of dispute resolution, there are fora and avenues that better fit certain types of situations. And as we can see, the judicial process in and of itself lends itself to these kinds of delays. But elsewhere, you'd find that environmental issues are dealt with rather more administratively rather than judicially. You know, and hopefully some of the adjustments and amendments that have been proposed in the petroleum industry bill soon to become an act will address some of those concerns. In particular, in general, we are at a place where we need to think about the governance of the petroleum industry in general. You know, we need to think about it. Why? Because hitherto we had players that were global entities, and you would argue are subject to some form of global best practice, are probably liable to other jurisdictions other than here. But as you see the landscape evolving, and a lot of those big multinationals and big corporates are beginning to exit. And we're going to have a flood, a mushrooming of local entities, and that's a great development. Our regulatory framework and institutions need to be capable of dealing with that scenario. I don't know if I explained myself clearly, or if
it's understood there. But one of the questions that came to my mind while thinking about the conversation I'm having with you right now is, first of all, at the initial stage, given how we began oil exploration in Nigeria, do you think the host communities and impacted communities, will come back to that definition later, were even considered in the first place? Because that could have been the reason for the prolonged judgment on this matter. It took 30 years and so many lives and livelihoods lost in the process. Do you think we actually planned to engage host communities when we began this oil exploration in the country?
Excellent point you asked me, to be honest with you. The Petroleum Act and the entire legal and fiscal framework of the petroleum industry, if you look at it very carefully, began as little more than a licensing regime for petroleum operations upstream. Not even gas, it was oil operations upstream. We didn't have any clear vision as to what we'd do. We didn't want gas, we didn't know how to deal with gas, we didn't know how to treat gas. And so we didn't have that much up till 1993 when we entered into the petroleum, the production sharing contracts. We didn't even have a framework for gas development or indeed monetization. So you would argue that the Petroleum Act in itself, which is the principal act, or at least this sort of principal act, is a little more than a licensing framework for the petroleum industry. Over time, we have added one piece of legislation to it and the other and the rest. And that's the point you have made, right? Which is an absolutely beautiful point to say, look, we didn't maybe have the opportunity to take a holistic view as to how we're going to develop. I mean, take Norway, for example. Norway essentially learning from the phenomenon of resource curse, said to themselves from day one and said, look, we're not going to expend any revenue earned from oil in Norway. We're going to take everything, in fact, and invest it, not even invest it in Norway, invest it in the best investment opportunities abroad. As at today, Norway has accumulated a sovereign wealth fund of over $1.3 trillion. Now imagine what that in reserves can do for any economy, how it can energize funding, how it can energize PPPs, infrastructure transactions, and the likes of it. And as a result, Norway, among other Scandinavian countries, among some of the happiest people in the world today. What's my point? It is that, so you're right, we have an opportunity. The best time to have done it was at the onset, 50, 60 years ago. We've missed all of that time. Now is a good time to take that sort of holistic view. My point is there a process by which we can address spillage, environmental issues, remediation through administrative processes other than the judicial process? And there are examples of this. I mean, when you had the Macondo spill, yes, a few of those matters went through the judicial process, but the relevant agencies in the US were able to award costs and penalties sufficient to compensate some of the people that were hurt. So you need to create that sort of focused attention. And so the point I'm making is that this issue we're having with the environmental matter only spotlights the entire governance framework. Okay? And that's your point, really. I mean, so it's not only the host communities that were not even looked at, that were not necessarily considered. I would argue that the entire economy was, in fact, not even taken into consideration. I mean, we have an oil industry that has been for over 50 years export focused. Okay, in the proper sense, we don't even have a vibrant petroleum industry, because in order for you to have a vibrant petroleum industry, you need a vibrant midstream and of course a downstream. Today, we're still trying to put that in place. So that's the point you've made, and you're right about it.
Well, you kind of threw a completely new light on that fact, which is the fact that we have been largely export focused and not as holistic in looking at the entire value chain to the advantage of the whole country. That perhaps, from if what you're saying right now is anything to consider, that perhaps would explain why the refineries haven't worked as efficiently as they would have. Would you say that?
Yeah, I mean, again, look, I wasn't prepared to sort of extrapolate things and take them in this way. I don't know. But look, you can say the same thing about just about many things, the way we've handled them in times past, okay? Take power as an example, and I'll get back to the point. But take power as an example. Do you know that the first power plant in Nigeria was built 15 years after the first power plant in England was built? The Jura power plant was built exactly 15 years after the first power plant in the UK was built. Today, the UK has over 100 megawatts installed capacity and are still planning even for, to accommodate growth and the likes of it. What happened? What happened was that whereas they quickly realized that their utility in state-owned, inefficient state-owned monopolies, because there are very few people who can really run efficient state-owned monopolies. China being perhaps one of the best examples. But other people have realized that they can't really quite run efficient and effective state-owned monopolies. So what they did was they opened it up to private investment. And so you were able to invest in that space. My point is that if you make data-driven decisions, and if you looked at the way the population was growing, even if the 4 refineries we have were producing at full capacity, that's a different issue altogether. They still will not be able to meet domestic demands for oil. So what should we have done? We should have opened up that sector, created a sort of framework that is necessary to open up the processing and refining sector and incentivize investment by the private sector and grow it. I mean, when was the last time you heard of inefficiency or corruption at NITEC? For some of us who are old enough to remember the heydays of NITEC, when was the first time? Just because we've done some of these things here, just by opening up that sector, look at how much, how you were able to liberalize and make it a value center rather than a liability to us. So that's the point we're making, is that we need to take that sort of holistic view of how we basically develop our petroleum resources for the benefit of everyone, including the host communities.
You know, it's interesting that you even mentioned. I wonder if anyone who is not so young will remember the word NITEL at all, just the way you have mentioned it. But you know, this judgment of the court and the order of the court re-emphasizing the Supreme Court judgment on this matter and giving a time limit for the payment. How significant pulling that along with the PIB as planned before it becomes a law in itself? Do you think it is prospective, is futuristic enough to anticipate such further problems that could arise, especially whether it's host communities or impacted communities? Many people have died as a result of the oil spills in the north, in the Niger Delta. Oil spill have killed businesses, have killed lives. Do you think this judgment, along with the PIB, will solve such similar problems as may come in the future?
Okay, just so we're clear, the judgment, the actual judgment. So what happened the day yesterday, or the day before yesterday, was not a judgment ordering Shell to make payments. It was actually a what do you call it now? It was essentially Shell abandoning its challenge of the enforcement of a Supreme Court judgment that was obtained almost 10 years ago. So we need to understand that this entire journey, like you said, has taken about 30 years. They went to the Supreme Court about 10 years ago, and it is the enforcement procedure that has been contested. Now, the judicial process is exactly what it is. It lends itself to these kinds of situations, okay? Now, 49.5 5 or thereabout billion naira. I'm not sure whether it is in dollar terms, depending on how you're counting. Raises a number of questions. So this money is going to be disbursed. Who is it going to be disbursed to? What's going to be the impact upon the community? Is this any part of it going to go into the remediation of the environment? Because as we speak, those environments continue to be devastated and to be in a mess. The water bodies are undrinkable. You can't fish. Economic livelihoods have been highly compromised. We need to think about those kinds of things. I mean, we can sensationalize 49 point something billion and everybody just walks away from it. But never waste a crisis. We are where we are, and I think people need to start to think about the environment. People need to think about their future generations. Those who are the recipients of these funds today, are they going to take it, squander it on behalf of the generations that are yet to be born? We need to think about those kinds of things going forward. But just to your point, something to check perhaps in the PIB is the creation of of 2 funds. The Remediation Fund and the Decommissioning Fund. So what this means is that it at least empowers the regulator, in this case the Commission, and that's what the upstream regulator going forward is going to be called. It empowers the regulation to at least to intervene with respect to the remediation of the environment. There is going to be fund that will be used to correct some of the things that you're showing on your screen right now. So that's maybe something to check, and then we can take it from there.
Whether or not it is significant, that's another thing altogether. Added to that, to the fact that the federal government, I think, in the wake of this government itself, have already begun to have talks around Ogole cleanup. How do we benchmark that against or along with this particular judgment and the issues that you have raised as far as the environment is concerned? Let's take that up when we return after these messages. Do stay with us. Two quick issues to raise with you, Mr. Aye, and that's the fact that this compensation has been ordered and the execution is what you, as you said, is what is being considered now. How significantly do you think it will remediate, if we can even use that word, for the lives of the people, for people whose lives have been lost, and how does it in any way compensate for pay any kind of compensation to the families of the people who have lost their loved ones? Do you think they have factored into this case?
Yeah. So that's an excellent point. I mean, again, how much? Yes, how much can compensate for one life? Not to mention 2 or 3, whatever else. There's no amount of money that can compensate a human life. We need to note that. The second point really is whether this is going to be impactful. Because we talk about significance, we need to talk about also impact. Is this going to be impactful on the lives of the people that are the Niger Delta? I mean, the Ogoni, the Agbara area, which is really where this is about. And is this going to impact the local economy? Is it going to impact the state? Is it going to create any sort of impact? And those are criticism. But our experience have taught us that it is not how much you have that translates to impact. It's how you employ what you have that translates to impact. And which is why I'm saying that the judicial process is probably too inadequate for the multiplicity of issues that are raised in the current circumstances. That you would need a combination of perhaps the judicial process for people who feel aggrieved and believe that they're entitled to compensation to be able to resort to, and that is their right. But as a quasi-judicial and perhaps administrative process that can ensure that, one, the environment is remediated, that 2, funds are created. So if you take the whole sort of post-community framework that has been proposed, the kinds of monies that were expended randomly or haphazardly are now required to be put in a trust. where the oil companies will act as settlers and create trust for the host communities and set up trustees who will then make decisions as to the employment of these funds over time, but not only to build infrastructure, but to create also investments for the future, for future generations. And philosophically, that's something we need to really get in our heads this generation, that, natural resources are both depletable and non-replaceable resources. And any generation that has access holds it in trust for future generations.
Well, on that, Mr. if you don't mind, just very, very quickly, if you can speak to this. Now, you referenced it earlier. The host communities have a stake now, and then there is the mention of the impacted communities. The definition is still being questioned, no doubt about that one. But concerning how the PIB will address the issue of host communities and impacted communities in the future to ensure that we do not get to this particular bus stop we are again, how optimistic are you that this law being proposed, already passed, and yet to become law, will answer those questions and we will never have to get here again?
Well, that's a difficult thing for anybody to say, and I certainly wouldn't give you or anyone for that matter that sort of assurance. No matter how well the laws are written, you have to understand that how did we get to where we are? We got here through decades of broken promises, breached trust, and just a lot of, just think about a marriage that has broken down for over 50 years. You're not going to be able to fix it. So there is the framework, which is something to chair, because it is the first time that we have a statutory framework for the engagement between producers and host communities and or impacted communities, whatever that is. Okay? So that's the first time we're having it. But there is the part of implementation where we need to basically build trust and get all stakeholders to give it a fair chance to run and be prepared to pivot and to make adjustments where we find any part of the framework to be defective. That is the more difficult thing to adjust.
Basically, build trust. I'm taking that away. It speaks to a lot of issues in the polity, not just in the oil industry. But we have to thank you very much and hope for the best, as you have said. Israel Aye is partner, commercial and energy law practice, CANDELP, and director with Aspen Energy. Thank you so much for your time and perspectives this morning.
Thanks for having me. I truly appreciate it. All the best.
Okay. So Sunrise Daily takes on another issue right after now. Well, thanks for staying with us this morning. Security issues are next, and one was hoping we would never come here, but here we are again, especially in response to that Amnesty International report that says more than 112 people have been killed in Kaduna and Plateau states within a month. And the question then is, how did AI arrive at their conclusion? What were the yardsticks? And are there things that could have been done to ensure this never happened in the first place? Well, thanks for staying with us this morning. Security issues are next, and one was hoping we would never come here, but here we are again, especially in response to that Amnesty International report that says more than 112 people have been killed in Kaduna and Plateau states within a month. And the question then is, how did AI arrive at their conclusion? What were the yardsticks? And are there things that could have been done to ensure this never happened in the first place? Well, we have two people joining us this morning. First is Osai Ojigo, who is Director, Amnesty International, Nigeria. She joins us along with Dan Manjang, who is Commissioner for Information and Communication in Plateau State. We did reach out to Kaduna State as well to send a representative, but we didn't get any word back. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Let me begin with you, madam. it's quite staggering, the issues that you have raised in that report, and that so many people have been killed within a month. Can you take us through the process of getting the report out?
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. It's quite a challenging process because when people report that loved ones have died and that they are facing a lot of challenges in their country, you have to ensure that you are not only listening and reviewing what they're sending to you, but you yourself are able to, as Amnesty International, you're able, as a researcher, to validate and corroborate some of this information. So our research involved eyewitness statements from several sources on the ground, reports by the authorities themselves, media reports, and then trying to place people where they said they were when these attacks occurred. We also got information from morgues where bodies were deposited, and also incidents that were reported and were documented by other sources other than the villagers and the communities themselves. Then this information were put together and then analyzed, and this led to the release that we issued last week. So it covers quite extensive reviews, and some of the numbers that we've shared also, we always emphasize these were the ones that we were able, as Amnesty International, to independently verify.
Well, did it come to Amnesty International as a surprise? At least you are a Nigerian, and we've been talking about all these issues for quite a while. Shocking, unpleasant as it is, did it come to you as a surprise?
Not really, because we've seen this cycle of violence erupt from time to time. And a few years ago, we had released a report looking at the conflict and the clashes that happens between herders and farmers and communities, particularly in this not central and not western states. And what we found is that the constant attacks and reprisal attacks that happen, there's always early warnings. The authorities are always notified, but unfortunately, the responses are always slow. And even at that time, when we released this report in 2018, Time to End, you find that most of the clashes, villagers will say we called for help and nobody came to us. And it always seems to also intensify during the rainy season. And when people should be farming, should be in their communities and are holed up at home. So you find that it starts at the beginning of the year and then it starts picking up. And then it gets to this season and then there's several attacks and several reprisal attacks occurring. So the pattern is known. It's going to happen. So what are we doing to ensure that it does not repeat itself? That is where the bulk of the failure of the authorities lie.
Well, let's just talk then to the authorities. Mr. Manjang, you've heard it. I'm pretty sure you've seen the report as well. And I know, I would expect that the loss of one life is bad enough, but 34 within 1 month, that must really touch government in Plateau State in a very, very vulnerable place.
Well, yes. As a matter of fact, what I'm going to say is not to validate or invalidate what Amnesty International is saying, because we have had a very gory experience on the Plateau. In the life of the past administration, we lost there was a day that we lost over 400 people, 400 to 500 people in a day. I must say, it happens, but in a long time, that was very, very tragic. But for these days, I am not here to validate. And like you did say, the loss of even property and animal life It calls for attention by the authority, and that is why we are up and doing to make sure that we safeguard the lives and property of the people. We have been sworn to safeguard the lives and property of people. And so even if property is lost and animals are lost, we are not happy as authority, and there's no authority that will be happy, not to talk of the loss of lives of human beings. These are people that their future is cut short. These are future leaders, future governors, future commissioners, future this and that, future technocrats. And so as authority, if you followed the news these days, the governor of Plateau State feels saddened. Even yesterday, he says he begs for forgiveness for things that happen to people, for the loss of lives and property, because he's the chief security officer of the state. And what that means is that there's no leader. It's not only the governor of Plateau State, but there is no leader in his right senses that would be happy that his people are being killed, because then on whose head do you govern? And so we take everything with all seriousness. If there's a crisis of this dimension, you know, a lot of things happen. A lot of funds are diverted from construction, from agriculture. Instead of you to do things that will make meaning to people, you now move to humanitarian services. You now move to reconstruction. You now move to reconciliation. But as a government, and any other authority, it is the onus rests upon you to make sure that even if this is not stopped, that it is left at the barest minimum. And that is why we have put a lot in place in Plateau State to make sure that we do not experience this. But the issues keep coming. If maybe in the course of this discourse, we would be able to tell you what we have done in the past and what we're doing now and the projections into the future. But as a matter of fact, there is nobody, there's no authority that will be happy to see that his state is being burnt. And more so, we in Plateau State that pride ourselves as the home of peace and tourism, would be the last to see that this state is burnt. It happened in the past, we frown at it. We're all in it together. And
Mr. Manager, just one second,
yes,
if you don't mind. You know, everything government is doing is, you know, what government says it is doing. But when, according to the report, the slow and ineffective response by security officials is contributing to the attacks and reprisal in the state, people are getting away with crimes. People would wonder, what is government doing if it is slow and ineffective in responding to issues such as this?
At this time, you must be able to say which component of government is slow. All of us know, including you, that the chief security of every state is the governor of the state. But constitutionally, he does not command troops. And so if you have to apportion blames, you apportion blames to the appropriate authority. Because the chief, that is why we are clamoring for, in some places, state police. In Plateau State, we are clamoring for community policing, so that the chief security officer of the state would be able to have teeth. He has teeth and he can bite. But so all of the chief security officers of the states, the governors in this case, have teeth, but they cannot bark, they cannot bite. And everybody knows this one. And so the onus rests upon squarely on the shoulders of those that are supposed to take responsibility. The governor, if you listen to the commissioner of police in Plateau State, the governor gave a marching order for them to occupy. And it remains there. It is not the governor's fault. at some point, it will not even be the fault of the security, that you have to apportion, you have to know the workings of the security. You have to know the workings of the machinery of government. And so
I'm trying to understand,
like
Mr. Manjang, my apologies. I'm trying to understand, exactly what you're saying now. If it is not the fault of the governor and it is not the fault of the police or the security architecture, then who will want to take responsibility for what is happening? As the report says, we already know that these things will happen. At least I understand that the governor or the chief security officer of the state always gets intelligence reports, and this is a reprisal, and it is not something that is coming new. Isn't there anything that could have been done in terms of collaboration of the state with the security apparatus to ensure that this doesn't happen again? It is not something that is new. It is something government knew before taking the job of protecting lives and property.
And that is why we have been able to put in institutions in place. And that is why the situation has not escalated. If government had not been proactive, particularly on the Plateau, the situation would have escalated. There would have been no Plateau today. If you look at the dimensions of the escalation of this crisis, I'm telling you that there was, in the life of the past administration, over 400 people that were killed in one night. And it has not happened like that since we came in. And we are not blaming that is past, but the government at every point in time, government is proactive. The institutions we have set up in place are the reason for why the crisis has not escalated beyond what it is. And so if I might say, all we are doing is not to justify the government's action or inaction, but as a matter of fact, government knows its responsibility, and government the world over has limitations. It is these limitations that have to be surmounted. Somebody must take responsibility. In this case, the state governor has given an order according to the constitution, and somebody has to take responsibility. And the security did occupy, and that is why there is a Plateau today. Otherwise, we wouldn't have anywhere that is called Plateau State today.
There are still questions, Mr. Manjang, around whether or not this could have been made impossible to happen. That it should never have happened in the first place. But we'll come back to that. Well, Madam, you have listened to the Commissioner for Information in Plateau State. How do you respond?
I think the first thing is for government institutions to recognize that they are a continuum and that they're a group. So to the people out there, government is government. So we know that there are federal, there are state authorities. We know that there are different divisions of labor. But when there's a crisis, when there's a situation, everyone expects their government to stand up, to sit up. You know the internal dynamics that are happening within the various agencies. And I think for us, the biggest issue is, can we even prevent the attacks? We haven't yet resolved the attacks that have happened in previous years in terms of prosecuting those that instigated the attacks, those that killed people, those that actually fuel the crisis so that they can benefit from it. It has been extremely difficult to show people that, crime doesn't pay. So you find that people are really literally getting away with it. So in the first instance, can we have a situation where the government can put in place strategies, tactics to prevent further attacks? Meanwhile, then use the time to retrace and find out who these culprits are and use them as examples to show that you cannot come and be displacing people in communities, you cannot come and be creating havoc and get away with it, and ensure that they can be punished according to the law. So these are some of the issues that would relieve confidence in the people and would address their immediate needs. We're very mindful of the fact that we are getting so many displaced people in registered camps, relying on family members. And Nigeria shouldn't be in a situation where you are constantly in a reactive mode. So something needs to give. And the issue is what tactics, what strategies can the authorities do? Can they lean on those that they know have the powers to make these changes and come together in order to prevent these attacks and ensure impunity does not reign supreme?
Let me take that straight to Mr. Manjang this morning. We all know that Mango in Bassa local government is no stranger to this kind of conflicts, this kind of attacks. It's happened before, and the fact that it's happening again, almost unabated, is what is troubling here. And as Madam Ajugo said the other time, government is a continuum. Whoever is in seat, as far as the farmer is concerned, the people in Mango are concerned, government is government. Has there been any arrest and any prosecution that would have been a deterrence for anyone to make sure this doesn't happen again?
Yes, thank you very much. We have a local, let me just quickly say that we have a local government called Mangu. So your pronunciation is Meyango, not Mangu, so that we will not miss the point for people that come from Plateau State. Having said that, whether there has been arrest, I would say yes, in the past and and presently, and the commissioner of police is in the best position to say how many. I don't have that figure now, but there are two things that are involved here. As a matter of fact, one, we know that government is a continuum, but one, we have to look at the issue of crisis merchants from local, national, and international. There are people that certainly benefit from this. And punishment, the second issue is we must look at punishment. For example, we have an anti-kidnapping law on the Plateau here, signed by His Excellency. People have not been prosecuted. It is not the fault of the governor. People have been arrested. They are in police custody. We expect them to be taken to court for prosecution. And we expect that the time for prosecution will be such that it will be short. And then for people that they are still called suspects, for people that are found guilty, the courts should pronounce. And then without leaving it to the governor of the state to see whether because in Plateau State, kidnapping attracts a death penalty. And we now look at it and see whether the governor will sign the fact that the people should die or should be killed or not. And so you see, governance is at different levels. At some time, the courts were on strike and stuff like that. And people were caught on the daily basis. They were kept in police custody because you cannot free them because they are suspects. And so, like I said, government, we agree it's a continuity. We also agree that there are various strata of governance. What the governor has been able to do, he has done. Other strata of governors should be able to do their own bit. We expect that prosecution should be going on, and the judiciary should find a mechanism whereby they will prosecute these people within the shortest possible time, so that if you see a crime being perpetrated, it is because that the laws are not being applied. It will
seem, Mr. Manjang, it will seem like you're trying as much as possible to abdicate the state of any responsibility in this matter. I know that at least there is an office of prosecution of sorts in the government of Plateau State at the moment. So are you waiting for another? Are you outsourcing the prosecution of people arrested under the law made by Plateau State and signed by the governor?
No, I'm not abdicating. If from the beginning, if you hear what I said just yesterday, His Excellency, the Governor of Plateau State, Right Honorable Simon Bakola Long, apologized. He apologized to people of Plateau State, and he did apologize to Nigerians that if people are being killed on the Plateau as a leader, he apologizes and he takes responsibility. And it is part
Mr.
of this
Manjan,
responsibility.
forgive me for butting in. Part of that report of Amnesty International also says that beyond just making these statements is the need for us to ensure these things doesn't happen again. As you said earlier, these things have happened. There have been pre this government, there have been days where we have hundreds of people dead in one day. The fact that there is even one single loss of life, you have also corroborated that, is bad enough. So is there any way, has there been any investigation, for instance, to know, okay, what has happened in the past and who are the people involved? And how do we ensure that we collaborate, we communicate with these people so that these things don't happen again? They do not do the same thing that they are doing now, seeing to the lives of many people being lost and the lives of the people who survived them being rendered, unpredictable.
Yes, there was a time that the state government had to go against community leaders and arrested them. They were arrested, they were given on bail. If you listen to the Commissioner of Police in Plateau State, there are people that were given on bail and they are being prosecuted. And so arrests are being made, prosecution is going on. But like I did say, we must step up our prosecution until we get it to the... Otherwise, if people are not punished, we'll be sounding like broken records every now and then, and lives will continue to be lost. But I can tell you that there are institutions, there's dialogue that is going on, and that is why the situation has not escalated more than what it is. At every point in time, we have a crisis of that dimension, or even if we have early warning signs, because we have people that we have the Operation Rainbow that has an early warning sign mechanism in their office, and we have people that have been employed, have been recruited. About 3,500 constabularies recruited and sent to the 17 local governments. And they're helping with intelligence gathering, and that is what we are doing. And I also join the fact that people must be prosecuted. We have a prosecution, but the prosecution should be up and doing. We don't have to blame them now. If you look at if you ask them, they will look at the issue of personnel and other things. But all the people are saying, including government, is that the people must be seen to be punished to serve as a deterrent to others. And these punishments are the responsibilities are in various strata. There's nobody that is happy for the governor to come out to say that he apologizes on behalf of what is happening, because of what is happening. It speaks volumes if we want to be fair to him.
Okay. Well, Mr. Jugo, you have listened to him again, and I don't know how satisfied you would be in that one. But let me ask you this. How much of these attacks do you think has to do with the economy of the people who are involved?
I think it's a very complex situation. There are so many issues involved. So there's the issue about food security. So definitely, we all know the prices of food in our country has risen, exponentially. And part of this, because farmers need to be able to plant and reap the harvest in due course. And the cost of conflict means that oftentimes farmlands are left unattended, harvests are lost. At the same time, we also have herders that are moving their cattle across various parts of the country. And there have been cases of cattle being missing, cattle being stolen. And there's this tension that everyone is trying to just survive. Everybody's trying to just make ends meet. Sadly, there isn't much social protection by the authorities, by the government, whether it's in terms of health, in terms of housing, in terms of benefits that people can access should they fall into bad situations. We always used to say that you just need one major illness for you to lose everything you have, because you're going to sell everything you have in order to get better. So there are all that. Then you have historical years of distrust in groups. So whenever there's an incident, the other group instantly wants to defend their people, even if they've committed a wrong. there's this inability for us to be able to separate our religious, our ethnic affiliations in trying to address issues of injustice in incidents that have occurred. So when you look at these various layers and these various complexities, you find that there's not one single reason why these attacks keep happening, but that it's a cumulative effect. And the issue is who can lead the people? Who can lead people to peace? Who can lead the people to justice? Who can lead the people to a situation where we're able to live harmoniously amongst one another? Recognizing that when a wrong has happened, there must be sufficient remedy. And that is the constant circle. Everybody on all sides are feeling some sense of injustice, some sense of unfairness that has been meted to them. And so when we talk about human rights of people, it's about the right of the people to live with dignity. And so the communities that are affected, are they living in dignity? Are they free from fear? And when crimes have been committed against them, have they been resolved regardless of whose interest is at stake in this situation? So the justice system needs to set up appropriately to respond quickly. The security agents need to be able to respond, to investigate, to prosecute, to ensure that regardless of who it is, the rule of law is held to account and everyone who has infringed the law faces the law. And finally, people seek leadership from the government authorities, whether it's in the person of the state governor, in the person of the president, in the person of their local government chairpersons, their chiefs, their religious leaders, to take leadership in finding solutions and long-lasting solutions, not just please just forgive each other and make peace, but long-lasting solutions that will address the root causes of these conflicts and the root causes of the financial and socioeconomic conditions people have found themselves, and then begin to build again, build trust, build communities, build an information network that knows that when they cry for help, they would be heard and the responses would happen. So it's a lot of things that people have gone through, but it takes a few steps in order to begin to address these issues. Thank you.
Well, you raised the issue of trust there, and one would say that's also multi-layered, because if we were to draw from the statements made by the Commissioner for Information in Plateau State, part of the things that he has said also indicates that there is a need, that there is perhaps a measure of collaboration between the federal authorities, agencies of the federal government and the state government that need to collaborate a little strongly, a little stronger. It would seem from what he has said that collaboration isn't very, very strong. And as far as the people are concerned, it doesn't matter who is bringing the help. Let that help just come. How do you see that gap, so to speak, being breached in order for this not to continue?
So in the first place, we wouldn't want to interfere so in the way the government agencies relate with one another. But one thing is clear, that no one is happy with what is going on. And in situations like this, we find ways to advocate, even amongst our colleagues, to find a lasting solution. I think that the state has, yes, we recognize that they have a very tough task at hand, but it's about what's the bigger picture. What do you want to achieve? And what you want to achieve is to get help when needed for your people, is to be able to ensure that everyone can live a life free of and free from harm and can enjoy that life. So it's not enough to be alive, because there are people in IDP camps now, but they are thinking, I'm so poor now, my farmlands are gone, my houses are gone, I don't have anything to return to. So that alone is even mental torture for this person. To find ways through which they can bring all the relevant actors to the table to find these solutions. Because ultimately, If these solutions are not found, the reprisals will continue. We'll finish this year. Next year, we'll be talking about these issues again. It's about finding that point of convergence that would get those that you need in order to provide the protection and to help you with the prevention to the table that would move these things forward. We know that it's a big task for the government of the day, but we know that it is not impossible, and it should be prioritized in a way that you go into those conversations, into those discussions with the overall objective, because ultimately we cannot continue like this. The insecurity is rising, and we know that for those of us in positions of influence, we should find other people of influence and other institutions of influence that can help address the issues.
There is one thing we do not want, madam, and that is for the people to take the law into their own hands. But in the event that government doesn't do the needful as and when due, and as your report says, slow to respond, there is a likelihood that the people may be considering, look, if we're not going to get help from government, maybe it's about time we begun to, help ourselves. Do you see that happening?
It's already happening. In fact, the reason why there was so much activity in that month was because people just felt, we have only ourselves, so we're going to take arms and fight. And that is why this is a dangerous trend. We shouldn't allow this to lead to organized crime in those communities. This is an early warning that where people feel that they are not being, their case is not being dealt with. They are going to take up arms, they are going to try to find means through which they can protect themselves outside of the law. And that is also wrong, that is also unlawful, but it's really about the security agents stepping in quickly enough to not only stop this from escalating, but justice needs to be seen to be done. It's not only about saying it. It's not only about saying, okay, we've arrested people. When you arrest people, what happened to them? Giving that feedback to the community, they are being prosecuted. They've been taken to court in this place. Having that kind of visible justice working is something people need to see. And then it will discourage others from taking up arms and then using that as justification. Because even though there are communities that were not affected by these clashes, they are caught at cross purposes. You find that criminal elements will exploit the situation under the guise of we are harming and protecting ourselves because the government has failed us. So government should not create that environment at all for criminal elements to hijack the situation and make it worse.
Well, Mr. Manjang, you have listened to that, what Madam said, that it's early warnings. People are beginning to take up arms to defend themselves because government is not acting quickly enough. Lives are being lost. Livelihoods are being lost. How is the government of Plateau State taking this on board?
Well, as like I said, we have been able to put up institutions. We are saddened by the fact that we continue to kill ourselves in this manner. And I can tell you that Plateau State, we have set up institutions that are speaking. One of the issues is that we must be able to, religious leaders must step in, community leaders must step in to be able to restore our value. That is what we are doing conscientiously on the plateau. For the institutions, the machinery of government, I consistently say that there are various layers. And here in Plateau State, we are trying as much as we can to deal with the criminal elements. You see, criminal elements are united in criminality. And so when you are able to identify them, deal with them accordingly, it has worked for us in the past. We have dealt with some of the criminal elements. It has reduced to the barest minimum the criminality that we are witnessing in the plateau. having said that, the issue of people that benefit from these crimes must be looked at seriously. There are institutional issues.
Well, hope we'll be able to get him back, because it'll be nice to know who are the people that benefit from what he's talked about, and is there any way the government of Plateau State want to make that known to everyone? Well, madam, you have had to interface with the different communities, and you know what they say. Some of them, according to your report, have had to run back to the IDP camps.
Am I being heard?
Okay, well, you're being heard now, so please go ahead. There's something you said about those who are benefiting from this uprisings. You want to tell us what the government knows about them? Mr. Manjang, are you still there? Okay, well, Madam Ojugo, how do we ensure that this does not happen again? Is there anything the people themselves can do beyond taking arms against themselves? Is there anything you think the people themselves can do to at least maybe collaborate, talk with themselves, have community conversations, so that, these, issues do not continue to escalate to the point that lives are being lost?
Thank you. I think one of the things that the communities can also do is to manage rumors and manage information that is often construed within very, very discriminatory language. I think people should work towards ensuring they get to the facts oftentimes. A lot of speech that is shared tends to be colored about past experiences, colored in terms of people's previous incidents that have occurred, rather than what has happened now and what needs to be addressed. But we recognize that a lot of things are emotive. Many people have lost family members, so it's quite traumatic experiences that people have gone through. And so communities need to find ways through which they support one another, but more importantly, that they are getting to the facts rather than allowing it to be colored by people's previous experiences in these situations, which can then lead to incomplete or insufficient information to addressing who actually has spearheaded the latest attacks. Okay. That said, communities have done a lot in terms of reaching out to the security agents whenever these things occur. And I think they should continue doing that, and they should continue finding out who are those who have been assigned to their communities, get their phone numbers, get access to them, ensure that they begin to build those bridges with them as well.
Well, thank you very much, Madam. Mr. Manjang, we're closing now, but you want to have some conclusive statements within 15, 20 seconds?
Yes, what I would say is that humanity must retrace its values. Government cannot do everything for the people, but we know that government has a responsibility. The people also have a responsibility to make sure that we love one another, that we eschew our prejudices, and we be seen to be our brothers' keepers. Now that we have a humanitarian problem in our hands, we as Africans know that we are brothers' keepers. And it is practically impossible for government to do everything for humanity. We must choose to live together as brothers and sisters and accommodate one another.
Absolutely.
Accommodate our ethnicity, accommodate accommodate our politics,
Yes,
accommodate
Mr. Manjang.
our humanity.
Yes, Mr. Manjang, that is all of that is correct, but do not forget that there is also the responsibility of government, which is to protect lives and property, and we cannot expect any less.
And even,
all right,
and
well, we are completely
government...
out of time, Mr. Manjang, so truly have to let it go now. We have to thank you very much for your time this morning. Dan Manjang is Commissioner for Information and Communication in Plateau State and joined us along with Osai Ojiho, who is Director, Amnesty International, Nigeria. Thank you so much, both of you, for your time and perspectives this morning, and all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sunrise Daily continues after now with one big issue, because it contains information about conversations about the largest population in Nigeria. Stay with us. Nigeria is ranked 161st in the Global Youth Development Index of 2020. The report was released a few days ago. And the index ranks countries between the lowest and the highest according to development in youth education, in youth, in education, in development, in employment, in health, equality and inclusion, in peace and security, and in political and civic participation. How well are we doing here? Let's have a conversation with, interestingly, three ladies. We say that this is inclusion. Joyce Daniels joins us this morning. She is a social engineering practitioner, as well as Oluchi Nwosu, who is a youth in the People's Democratic Party, PDP, and Executive Director, Diela Orchid Media, as well as Rinsola Abiola, who is a youth in the All Progressives Congress, APC, and is a member of the Progressive Youth Conference, APC. Thank you so much for joining us, ladies, this morning. But let me begin with Joyce Daniels, who joins us virtually here in Lagos. This ranking isn't new. I mean, it's something that's been up and coming. But when you also juxtapose it with what you heard the president of the AFDB says, you would wonder, did they compare notes?
They definitely did compare notes. Thank you, Ayo, for having me. It's a long time coming. It's the conversation that has always been. So what has changed? I would like to talk about solutions. I'm all about solutions. What has changed or what should change? The index report also makes recommendations, and I think that's where our focus should be. There were 5 major recommendations where governments, and I dare say families and social groups should be focusing on, which are digital skills for young people. These are the things that will equip us to move forward educationally. Mental health services. I'm not surprised this showed up as a recommendation because a lot of our youth are already very disconnected, sad, angry. So if we don't cater to their mental health, then we may not get them back on track. The recommendation number 3 is apprenticeships, meaning we should teach entrepreneurial skills constantly so that youths can develop and create funds, what do we call it now? Income, create income, as simple as that, for themselves. And I was surprised about the road safety, but then again, it's no shock because there are a lot of accidents on Nigerian roads all the time and many youths are affected, but because they're not plane crashes, we don't make too much noise about them. That's just me saying. And finally, of course, is youth participation in decision-making, which includes politics and civics. If we follow this trend, we will win. Solutions only.
Well, we cannot talk about the solutions, Joyce Daniels, without at least understanding what the problems are. But then there are those who are already in the practice. And so let's talk to them in our Abuja studio. Let me begin with Ms. Oluchi Nwosu. It's interesting that, you know, we have a national youth policy 2019 to 2023 that has one of the 5 cross-sectoral development pillars as participation, inclusiveness, and equitable opportunities for all youth. How well do you think we're doing, in that regard? It's 2 years into that policy already.
Thank you very much. Let me start by saying that we cannot be thinking about addressing some of these issues when, as youths in Nigeria, our lives are in danger. I'm sure there should have been some improvements, but owing to the fact that we are plagued with a challenge of insecurity in Nigeria, until we're able to solve that, until we're able to address that, every other thing would pause, because insecurity has taken over most of the issues bugging us. To start with, when it comes to the issue of inclusion in the political space, the youths have been used as nothing but stepping stones for people to, get up there. The person who joined us earlier on said something about solutions. But if we're profiling solutions, we ought to bring out the problems on ground. What are the problems facing the Nigerian youth in the political space? One of the biggest challenge that Nigerian youths face is what? They don't open up the spaces for people to come in. And even when people come in to the space, they don't seem to allow them to be part of critical decision-making. Decisions that would affect them as human beings, they are practically shut out of it. So there's the weapon. I always say this. There's a weaponization of illiteracy, political illiteracy, meaning they don't want the youths to know this, and then they don't, because they know that when you know these things, you'll be able to do exploits. Now, before we get to that point, as youths in Nigeria, how many people can comfortably come out and say political participation right now is their problem? The problem we have is trying to stay alive. All across the country, if you have to look at activities that have taken place in different parts of the country, in the East you have young people crying out against police and military brutality. In the Middle Belt, they are crying out against bloodbath and what they now call ethnic cleansing. In the North, schools have been shut down because of the activities of bandits in this area. Most of the people that have been abducted are youths, are students. So how do you want to begin to talk about, how do you intend convincing a Nigerian youth who is struggling to just stay alive and survive to begin to struggle to get into the political space? We need to address this issue of insecurity, first of all, before we can get to other things, because this particular issue has overtaken other things.
Well said. Anyone would want to, who is listening will say now. But let me ask Risola Abiola, who is a youth in the APC and a member of the Progressive Youth Conference in the APC. All the issues that you have heard so far, I'm wondering how the youths in the ruling APC are onboarding these conversations, this information that is making the rounds all over the place. How are you taking it on board, the youths in particular?
Okay, so recently in June, we held a conference essentially to aggregate the voices of young people and put the concerns of young Nigerians before the leaders of our party, as the governing party in the country at the moment. And following that, we've also stepped up activities under the leadership of our interim national youth leader, Barrister Ismail Ahmed, to ensure that we engage our leaders, not just at the federal level, but regional and state levels, to ensure that youth voices are being heard. And when we talk about aggregating aggregating youth voices, it's not just about young people who are within the APC or young people who are politically active. We're talking about young people across the country generally. Because we also recognize that there is something that needs to be done regarding youth inclusion, regarding youth empowerment, regarding youth restiveness, regarding youth development generally. And we've been playing that active role of advising our leaders and putting, key policy ideas, actionable ideas together, and even even making recommendations regarding, say, for instance, the ongoing party leadership election process. And that's because we believe that a holistic approach needs to be taken to correcting the challenge with youth development in the country at the moment. Yes, we have a challenge with insecurity, it's obvious. But at the same time, I believe politics determines everything. So I wouldn't say that it is entirely correct to say that because insecurity is a challenge, political participation should not be a priority for young people, or young people shouldn't view it as such at the moment. Politics determines everything from the price of rice to the price of gari to how things are done, to how funds are allocated in our budgets. And that's one thing that I really, really want young people to understand. And that's one thing that we are also really taking up within the party as young people within the party, engaging to ensure that beyond just being members of the party, beyond just canvassing for the party, young people also occupy positions of leadership. And then we talk about issues like youth empowerment. Economic empowerment is key, even in politics. And I say this as somebody who has been very politically active for a while. And we've had a number of initiatives by this administration, by this party, targeted at enhancing economic empowerment opportunities for young people. Take the Nigerian Youth Investment Fund, for instance. I think the first tranche has been paid out. There are still other tranches that will be paid subsequently. We've had the End Power. I think that's about the largest economic empowerment program targeted at young people that we've had so far in the history of our democracy. We've had a couple of other initiatives targeted at enhancing young people's earning capabilities, supporting them with skill acquisition. A couple of our governors are also doing the same thing at state level. There's a lot of effort that's been made, but this is a very large country. And beyond just looking at the federal government, we also need to put a lot of pressure on our leaders at state level to ensure that whatever ideas are being pushed, for instance, at the federal level, are also being replicated at the state level. Take the ease of doing business, for instance. If the federal government is pushing ease of doing business and states are not very committed to it, a lot of the businesses will be domiciled in states, and that's where job creation happens. So if our states are not committed to creating a conducive business environment, there really is only so much that the federal government can do. So I believe the honor still lies on us as young people to ensure that we hold our leaders to account. The INEC voter registration process is on at the moment. We'll be choosing us a new set of leaders come 2023, God willing. There's a lot of work that needs to be done between now and then to ensure that those we actually elect to represent us, to protect our interests, to handle administration in our states are people who actually do have youth interests at heart. So everything that we do is tied to politics. All the decisions that are made are tied to politics. Everything that happens in a country, in administration, with governance is tied to politics. So young people cannot afford to not view politics as a priority because it pretty much determines everything else.
But when you take into consideration the fact that this report, the report that initiated this that provoked this conversation that we are having, is the Global Youth Development Index, and Nigeria hasn't scored very, very fairly in that, and it's a report from 2020. You know what happened in 2020, especially in October 2020, and the aftermath of that one. Before October 2020 and after October 2020, you know the way youths have been feeling. But talking about the Youth Development Index, do you think we are even giving that a thought? Even if the youths are interested, just hypothesizing now. Suppose the youths are interested. Do you think they are developed enough? The Youth Development Index is even favorable on the part of the young people enough to say, I think I can do this, or I think I want to do this?
I will say that as somebody who is from a background where I've done a lot of advocacy in addition to politics, the key to solving challenges is sustained advocacy. Things aren't perfect. I'm not going to say that they are. The ranking is not positive. I'm not going to say that it is. What I'm saying is that as young people within the party, we are taking responsibility. We are putting the key issues before our leaders, and we are working to ensure that action is taken on things that we need to see action being taken on. So we're not claiming that things are perfect either. No, we're not doing that. But we believe it is our responsibility to ensure that we safeguard the interests of young people. And that's what the youth structure within the party has been doing so far. We're working really hard in that regard.
Well, Joyce Daniels, you've listened to two young ladies who are already in politics, in members of political parties. And there are many others who are there who are not with us right now, and that's the voting population with the largest catchment in the country. And the next political cycle is just around the corner. Politics determines everything. Many people believe that, and of course you also heard Mr. Abiola say the same thing. How do you think we should encourage the young people? Or maybe before we get to that, what systems or mechanisms of government, whether at the federal level or at the state level, do you think is lacking and should be encouraged to strengthen the development initiatives that will help us, make the youths better?
Systems that are lacking that should be improved. Number one would be national orientation. We can't do what we don't know. So we need orientation ongoing, constantly, without gap, without fail, national orientation. What should the youths know? Where should the youths go? Information. So of course, that very closely leads to education. Our education system that needs to be revamped to be more upskilled, to be more skill-based than just theoretical, and with more civics and soft skills, emotional intelligence, social intelligence, so that decision-making by youths are better. These are areas that are lacking and can be strengthened by government, seeing that government is still majorly responsible for education and national orientation. If these two are strengthened with concerted effort, we would see better awareness, which will create interest. There's so many challenges at the same time. We should fix all of them at the same time. I don't think one will wait for the other. We would strengthen these. They would be very helpful. National orientation.
The challenge, is that while the issues of today are quite strong, the future beckons as well. And I also know that in the Constitution, there is a constitutional requirement that says national integration is something that government has to do. It is in the Constitution, the 1999 Constitution, and that part has not been removed since all of the amendments have been happening. And clearly it would seem like maybe government is doing something about that, maybe government is not. It's not. It doesn't seem like much is happening in that regard. Yet youths are always active in the political cycles every time we have had it. Do you think they are well placed in the areas where they can make significant impact?
No, they are not well placed yet. So it speaks to a lack of goodwill, in my opinion, a lack of goodwill on the part of the decision makers who we call government. It is obvious. Somebody has called it being weaponized, or being, maybe you can even call it oversight just for sake of conversation. But it is clear that no effort or minimal effort has been made. Now, just because we're talking about government, can I also talk about the fact that individual growth, individual decision to grow, individual decision to be involved is a key to solving the problems? So if government isn't going to do it for us, perhaps we should start educating ourselves. That's why we have private schools and private everything else. We already provide our own power and our own technology. So we might as well provide our own orientation in order to get the right education and fit ourselves in somehow. Nobody's saying it's going to be easy, just needs to be done.
Ms. Nwosu, you spoke to a number of issues earlier, and could you share what your own experience has been being a part of a political party, a leading political party at that?
Please, I didn't get the question. Please, can you?
I said, I'm asking if you're willing to share what some of your own experiences have been as a member of a leading political party in Nigeria.
Well, it's been quite eventful. At the same time, it's been really scary. I started off by talking about the issue of insecurity. Now, in the political space, as a woman, a young woman in politics, one of the things that I and many other people are faced with is the issue of gender-based violence. And we see that play out a lot. Being a member of the opposition party, we've seen quite a lot happen during the elections. I can mention just a few. We've seen how a woman, Natasha Akpoti, was treated. We saw how other people were treated. And a woman leader in my party, a mother, a leader, was burnt alive in 2019. These are part of the things that scare young women from getting into the space. These are part of the things that discourages. How do you look at a young woman tomorrow or even today and tell her, oh, it's okay to join, you can participate, when she has seen that something as bad as murdering somebody in that manner happened and nothing has been done yet. No word has been heard, not from the presidency, not from the ruling party, not from the governor of the state, which is Kogi State. Nothing has been heard. They haven't even paid attention to the family, all the agitations, all the demands from that family. Late Mrs. Salome Abu, her family has not been listened to till now. So for me, as a young woman in the opposition, it's really, I will not lie, it is discouraging. We just keep trying to push, and then until these things can be solved, until you can tell us that if someone raises a hand to slap a woman in the political space, there are serious penalties for it. Only then will you begin to draw the attention of young women to participate. So yes, it's been an eventful journey, but it's been scary too.
And I'm pretty sure that that's not the, touching as that is, Ms. Nwosu, I'm pretty sure that's not the only thing that would scare anyone. One of the issues a number of people have also mentioned is the spending power. For instance, I mean, just recently, you are not unaware that the Electoral Act has been amended, and the proposition is that the campaign funding, the politicking funding has been increased significantly. I'm wondering, do you think that is a concern that may discourage young people from coming into politics?
Well, I think many young people would see that as a challenge.
Okay. So as a result of that, if it's going to be a challenge, is that saying that youth will not be willing to come into politics?
The truth is, the youth need to be supported. You need to support them. You need to give them the platform. You need to allow their voices to be heard. Politics, before a youth can participate, what's participation? What people see as participation is actually just tokenism. The point where they bring you to a point where they just let you make little inputs from afar, then get little things as compensation. I am speaking because the youths have made clear demands. They are asking for specific things at the moment. We want to be part of critical decision making. We've been there in the party, we have served, and this is not just about my party. I'm not talking because of my party. It's everywhere. The leaders need to open up the spaces for youths, allow them participate, and give them a level playing ground as well. Because in the long run, these people who we see in these positions will get weak as they grow older. Who are the people that they have raised to now occupy those places?
Well, Ms. Biola, let me ask you this. Do you think the young people in Nigeria feel they are being listened to?
Well, to a large extent, based on the engagements I've had with a lot of young people across the country, well, I think it varies from place to place, really. Because if you're looking at a place like Nigeria, you have to understand that the way you engage in a particular zone would be considerably different from how you engage in another. So I think it varies from place to place. But to a very large extent, there are mechanisms that we can employ for engaging authority. Although I feel like we're not doing enough engagements. That's what I think. I would like to make a comment, if I can, regarding some of the issues raised earlier with Mr. Nwosu. And I think the first being the issue of the cost of political participation, like talking about the Electoral Act amendments to it. It's very important that we realize something. Politics is expensive the world over. I've run for office. I know what it's like to actually run a campaign and how much resources would be required to do so. As young people, I think beyond just asking for inclusion, we also need to set up mechanisms to support each other. If we have young people who we believe can do a good job, we should be able to rally around them. And this is the same recommendation that I put forward for women. Take a country like the US. You spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on adverts for just social media, even for a lot of candidates. It is very expensive. We don't have a crowdfunding culture in politics in Nigeria just yet. And I think that's one of the things that we really need to change as young people and as women, if we're looking to seriously enhance the level of representation for marginalized groups, even people with disabilities too. So I think beyond just talking about the Electoral Act, even if the Electoral Act pegs, the cost of running for office for the House of Reps at 5 million naira, realistically speaking, that's not enough to elect anybody. So I think we need to focus a lot more on solutions that can actually deliver the kind of results that we need. Talking about young people's inclusion, talking about women inclusion, talking about inclusion for people with disabilities, marginalized groups generally. We need to be able to put our money where our mouth is and actually rally around each other. And we need to come out in large numbers and vote. As I said earlier, I started out with youth activism before going into mainstream politics. And I think when we talk about young people are not being allowed to do this, women are not being allowed to do that, young people are not being given the space, we need to learn how to take these things, because a lot of our leaders who are in position now, they didn't get there because they were allowed to. They learned to take it. And that's what we are doing within the APC, under the leadership of our interim national youth leader, Barrister Ismail Ahmed. We're setting up structures to engage our leaders, to make our demands very clear. There's been a lot of work that has gone into it since the formation of the party. There's been a lot of history. There's been a lot of efforts. A number of us are in key positions, key decision-making positions. Others are still in positions of influence within the party, within their state governments. But there is a need to actually translate this to make sure that there is enhanced inclusion, proper inclusion for young people. This is the administration that signed the Not Too Young to Run bill into law. There were attempts before then to reduce the age of eligibility for elective office that did not scale through. So it's not as if government itself is inherently hostile to young people. But young people and women, we need to go beyond. I think we need to be a lot more aggressive about how we engage power structures, about how we get our demands across. And we also need to learn to rally around and support each other. There are a lot of women candidates who came out at this last local government elections. Lots of them very brilliant across the states, Lagos and Ogun. Very brilliant, very well-learned, very skilled, very passionate about development.
Issues that you have raised so far.
But they did not get the kind of votes that they needed to scale through, except those who perhaps...
Yes, my apologies. We're running out of time now.
It's okay.
But let me ask you... Joyce Daniels, in this engagement, we haven't even gotten to the point of youth employment and so many other issues that revolve around that one. Definitely, it's an ongoing conversation. But in closing, what would you be saying to the young people watching right now?
Do for yourself. That's what I say to everyone, young people, women, everyone. Work for yourself. Ensure that you grow. Ensure that you fulfill your purpose on earth. If we see that there's a lack in leadership, there is a lag in leadership, that we need improvement, then let us get involved. What will it profit a youth to gain comfort and lose your soul? So if you need to be inconvenienced, go join a political party. Yes, I always say that it's late when we're voting on on election day. Get involved in the political party so that you can even decide who the representatives will be, who will vote for on election day. So get involved, go through the pain of education. Education is painful. We spend how many years in university? We pay so much money. Get involved in improving your life. Get involved in improving the country. Don't wait for anybody. We can blame government, blame parents, blame the future, blame the past, but we can also be responsible for the change that we seek and that we deserve.
I wish they would be able to listen to you right now and give you their own responses, but we are out of time. So, Ms. Nwosu, what would be your parting shot in this matter?
Well, I want to say the youth of a nation, the youth in a nation is the strength of that nation. If you fail to protect the youth, if you fail to keep the youth, if you force the youth to run out of the country like we see with the records of brain drain these days, that nation is headed for doom. That's what I have to say. Protect the youth, keep your youth, empower the youth. Empowering the youth is not giving us money, it's not buying us cars, it's not giving us keke. Empowering the youth starts with little things like our human rights, giving us a conducive environment to live, to flourish, and to function. Thank you.
Well, we have to thank you very much, ladies, for participating in this conversation this morning, and hope that the needful is being done in the minds of those who will action some of the issues that you have raised. Oluchi Nwosu is a youth in the People's Democratic Party, PDP, as well as Executive Director, DLR Orchid Media, along with Risola Abiola, who is a youth in the APC and member Progressive Youth Conference of the APC. Both of them joined us from our studio in Abuja, as well as Joyce Daniels, who is a social engineer, joined us virtually. Thank you very much, ladies, for your time and your thoughts this morning. Well, your contribution to the conversation we have had today next, and Timi Afolabi is the first that I'll be looking at, talking about youth development in Nigeria, says, it is sad that many of our youths have been taken over by criminality of internet fraud and as thugs in the hands of politicians who only see them as tools to accessing power. Sadly, the remaining majority are confused, looking for escape routes out of Nigeria because those in power only pay lip service to youth development in Nigeria. To tackle these ugly trends, the youth should galvanize themselves and challenge the status quo if indeed they want to see a bright future. Professor Enakeda says human capital development is the greatest asset of any developed economy. The economic empowerment of the youth is a pillar for growing the SMEs, which is the heart of the economy. While power, security, and single-digit loans are the economic engine that is not available to youths in Nigeria. Oh boy. Abalis Caleb says about insecurity and responsibility, hearing the Commissioner of Information repeating same statement that governors are not responsible baffles me. But they don't mention that during campaign. When they receive security votes, we don't hear anything. If you talk of troops, it appears as if security is all about troops. Same mistake the federal government is making. Let's do all we can to secure our people. Oluwadari Abiola says about the Amnesty International report, I think it's time for the AI also to stop making it look as if they are established to see only bad incidents in Nigeria. Let them not portray themselves as part of tools to divide Nigeria the more. And George, talking about Nigerian security challenges. Personally, I do not know how we got to this point in the history of Nigeria, but please, can the people in government accept responsibility for the breakdown in security for once? It is really scary to hear the figures of human beings that have been killed due to the breakdown of security in Nigeria, and very sad that nobody or group has been brought to book till date as a result of the killings. Adenike Awe says about insecurity, legal jurisprudence states that justice must not only be done, it must be seen to be done. Communal herder farmer clashes are now common occurrence amongst us. The government should evidently bring perpetrators to justice and also set up a criminal damage compensation scheme for victims. Victims shouldn't be left to depend on God's justice. And so very, very interesting comments that have been made by all of you, and I'm pretty sure there are so many others that we couldn't fix. Thank you very much for